Well, South Africa's first batch of Pfizer vaccines will be sent to the National Control Lab for quality assurance. It arrived in South Africa last night. The jab will be distributed once it's been approved. To talk to us more about the Pfizer vaccine, I'm joined now by Wits Vaccinology Professor Shabir Madhi. Prof, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. You know, many of us went through research regarding the different vaccines and what they mean when they are actually in a person's body. But let's refresh, right? Talk to me about the Pfizer vaccine and what it does in the fight against the coronavirus.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So the Pfizer vaccine, like the Moderna vaccine, is known as a messenger RNA vaccine. It's a relatively new technology that's being used to produce vaccines, but that technology has been used previously as an example to produce so-called vaccines against cancer. So it's not completely novel technology, but in the field of vaccines to prevent infectious diseases, it is a new technology. What this vaccine does is that it delivers the RNA which codes for a spike protein, which is a component of the virus that's of special interest to us, because all of the evidence indicates that if you're able to produce antibody to the spike protein, you're able to prevent infection or at least and even severe disease from the virus. So this RNA is injected into the muscle cells, and it's immediately read by the machinery of the cell to produce this protein known as a spike protein. Importantly, this RNA doesn't integrate into the human DNA, and I think that's important. In addition to which, this RNA, in fact, is degraded very quickly after it has been used to signal the production of the spike protein. So that spike protein then is released into the circulation, and that is what our immune system responds to. The white cells, what we call lymphocytes, starts mounting an immune response to the spike protein, which is recognized as foreign, and that's what produces the antibodies. And other parts of the immune system are stimulated, which eventually confers a protection against the virus.
So how effective is the Pfizer vaccine against that variant first discovered in South Africa?
Right. So in the large Pfizer trial that was undertaken, it included about 800 participants from South Africa. And amongst those 800 participants, they did identify 8 cases of COVID-19, all of which were mild and moderate. And of those 8 cases, all 8 cases occurred in a placebo group. That is, people that didn't receive the vaccine. And of those 8 cases, there were 6 cases due to the B1351.
All right. Prof, are you back?
It's clearly promising that this vaccine possible.
Sorry, Prof, you froze for a second. Yeah, we didn't catch the last part of what you were saying.
So I was saying that in the South African component of the large trial, where there were 800 participants that were enrolled, there were 8 cases of COVID-19, 6 of which were due to the B1351 variant. And all of those cases that occurred amongst the 800 participants occurred in the placebo group. So the vaccine certainly seems to protect against the B1351 variant. There is some data from Israel, which basically does indicate that you could expect some breakthrough events of the B1351 variant. That doesn't come as a surprise, because we know that even with the Pfizer vaccine, the ability of the antibody that's induced to neutralize the B1351 variant is slightly compromised, but fortunately less so compared to the AstraZeneca vaccine.
So why are there 2 doses for the Pfizer vaccine?
So that is to optimize the immune response. So much of the data, in fact, supports that even after a single dose, you already start getting a protection against the virus. But the higher the antibody concentration, the more likely you're able to gain better protection. And in the South African context, that is especially important, because we now see that if you're able to induce high levels of antibody with these vaccines, you're able to overcome some of the resistance that is caused by the B1351 variant. So it's absolutely necessary that you get 2 doses, more so in a South African context, where the variant that's circulating is relatively resistant to the antibody that's induced by these vaccines.
And what about the side effects of the Pfizer vaccine? Because, you know, we all spoke about the Johnson & Johnson blood clotting, but now people will look out for side effects of Pfizer.
Yeah, so the issue of blood clots, interestingly, in the United Kingdom, where they did an analysis, they showed a similar sort of rate of these blood clots in people that received the Pfizer vaccine compared to people that received the AstraZeneca vaccine. But that is obviously manifold lower than what one would experience if someone develops COVID, as an example, tenfold lower. So it is possible that a Pfizer vaccine might have a similar sort of complication, but importantly, that complication is extremely rare. And I think that's what we need to appreciate. The risk-benefit ratio is clearly in favor of continuing vaccination. In addition to which, the Pfizer vaccine is also what we call reactogenic, which means that it does induce local responses, inflammatory responses at the site of injection, and more so after the second dose. So it might cause someone to feel a bit miserable for perhaps a day or so, including local site tenderness and perhaps a slight fever. But again, that is really telling us that the body's immune system is actually mounting a response to the vaccine, and that's the reason why you usually experience those sort of minor side effects after vaccination, and those side effects are essentially self-limiting.
And then just in terms of the storage, it has to be stored at a very, very cold temperature, not like the Johnson & Johnson, right?
Correct. So it needs to be preferably stored at minus 70 degrees Celsius, but fortunately they've done some stability testing, which indicates that it can be stored at a slightly higher temperature, including at minus 20 degrees Celsius for a short period of time. So it's not as bad news as we believed it to be at the start, where it needed to be kept at minus 70 degrees Celsius for a long period of time. So for a long term, it still needs to be stored at minus 70, but in a more short, medium term, it can be stored at temperatures where those type of facilities should be available in many settings.